It was right here at the south end of the infamous Skyway Bridge where the commercial live rock industry in Florida actually began in August 1984. For it was here on one of our collecting trips when we were collecting invertebrates, polypa, and hermit crabs from these very rocks that I looked a little closer and I said to myself, this would look great in my aquarium at home. So I harvested a few of these rocks and we took them back to our local wholesaler here in Tampa. Upon arrival, we negotiated a price for these rocks and we came across $5, $7, and $9 per rock. This actually was the first live rock commercially sold here in the state of Florida on the West Coast. Unfortunately, the rock that we collected here was not of that great quality, so we proceeded to find new sources of live rock here on the West Coast. This story continues and takes us about 40 miles north of this very Skyway Bridge to an area called Tarpon Springs, Florida, where we collected live rock for the preceding years. So now let's take you further into the story of live rock, past, present, and future. We'll take you out to the Tarpon Springs Reef and show you where the live rock was collected. From that point, we're going to go on an actual rock dive trip and show you the end of the industry, because in another year this industry will be dead and there will be no more wild rock collection here in the state of Florida. So come along with us for the past, the present, and the future of live rock continues.
Here we are at Duke's Marina in Tarpon Springs, Florida, home of our vessel, the Critter Getter, for the past 15 years. Here comes my partner, Mark Caldwell, and our #1 chief diver, Mary Dolan. They'll be hooking the boat up and getting it ready, and we'll put it in the water and take you out rocking. We were the only boat collecting live rock here on the Anclote River for many years in the mid-'80s. Suddenly, there was every grouper boat, longline boat, and snapper boat showed up in the river, and they became live rockers. This pressure on the resource was the beginning of the end for the industry, because this got the federal government and the state of Florida involved. In 1989, the state of Florida called the major players of the industry to the state's capital for a meeting on live rock, where they told us they were going to phase out the wild collection of rock but allow us to do aquaculture of rock. So I raised my hand, which began the process of leasing land from the state for aquaculture. This process was not easy. It took 5 years, 2 trips to court, $18,000 in lawyer's fees before we received our permit, but we did receive a permit. Here we are leaving the dock. We'll be heading up the Anclote River, around the island, and out into the open Gulf. Today looks like a beautiful day on the Anclote River, but as soon as we get around the island here, you'll see how rough it actually can be collecting live rock. Collecting rock is not an easy process. You have to have about $50,000 in equipment to be able to go out, recover rock, come back to shore, be able to hold it and sell it. Thus the price of live rock that you see in the stores when you go to purchase live rock. It's not an easy occupation. A little further down the river here, and Captain Mark will be powering up the vessel to go out into the Gulf. We'll be heading towards the artificial reef, Tarpon Reef, where we first begin collection of live rock. Here's Captain Mark getting ready to go. You'll notice our state-of-the-art bottom finding equipment, satellite navigation equipment, compasses, and Lorans. This is the channel leading out to the Gulf of Mexico near Anclote Island. You'll see the seas are going to turn a little rough here in a few moments, which is like it is most of the time collecting live rock. You have to go out 15 to 20 miles offshore each day to reach the federal water area where the live rock is collected. You'll see it's a beautiful day today. Now watch. These are 4 to 6 foot swells and with white caps.
Is it rough out today?
We don't want to second you know?
What do you think?
That's exactly what.
This is our first mate, Terry, and here we are at the Tarpon Reef. Tarpon artificial reef on a pretty rough day, but it was right over here underneath that yellow marker where we collected live rock for the preceding 5 years after our first initial collection at the Skyway Bridge. This area out here is a much scattered bottom, beautiful area, lots of loose rock, which is what we collected in those days, was just went around and picked our rock up. Today is a rough day, but we're going to proceed now on out about another 9 miles out here to federal waters, and we're going to start diving for some wild live rock. This is the spot where it all began, Tarpon Springs Artificial Reef. So come on, let's go, let's get wet. Now we've made it out to federal waters, which is approximately 20 miles offshore where we are now. Captain Mark is using his electronic navigation and bottom finding equipment to find the best area to anchor in. We'll be anchoring up here as he's determined this is a good spot to collect live rock today. We use ropes and bags and buoys to collect our live rock with. The diver actually carries these along with him underwater. That buoy there is marking the site that Captain Mark picked out for us today, which is where they'll be heading to as soon as they exit the boat. We'll be getting our divers ready to go here. They'll have their equipment together. These are the bags that they use, the mesh bags to place the rock in on the bottom, with the lines and the buoys so they can be recovered from the surface when the divers re-enter the vessel.
Anybody see Jaws last night on TNT?
Yeah, I watched Jaws last night.
As our divers get ready to get wet, we're out here in about 60 feet of water today diving, where we'll be collecting our rock. Each diver will take with him or her 5 bags, corks, and floats to the bottom. There they'll swim around and find the best rock available in this area. Sometimes they have to swim hundreds of yards away from the boat because the Gulf of Mexico is 99% sand bottom and about 1% rock bottom. But Captain Mark's very experienced at this, and usually he puts us right on top of the spot. Here you see the buoys have gotten tangled up, and Terry volunteered to jump overboard with all the black-tip sharks to loosen up the buoys there so Mary can continue swimming and collecting rock. There are a lot of sharks out here in this area, but we haven't had too many problems with them over the years. Okay, the divers have been down about 45 minutes. That's about the length of an average dive. Sometimes we dive 2 to 3 tanks a day, depending on where we're collecting and what we are collecting. Mary's first back on the boat, followed by Captain Mark from the depths below. You'll notice by the area that we're in here in the buoy locations that the divers did not swim very far today from the boat at all. In fact, most of the buoys are less than 100 foot from our original anchoring spot, which means collecting in this area was very good today. They didn't have to go very far. Here you see the buoys on the surface. Those are each individual bag that's been harvested by the divers and are on the bottom. Here Mary grabs the cork and the rope and we'll begin to haul our rock up. We use an electric winch for this, although for many years we used our backs until we got a little smarter at this. This makes it much easier. Recovering the bags, they all weigh about 100 to 125 pounds per piece when they come up over the side. Here you see freshly harvested live rock. You can see all the pretty colors on the rock. This rock here in the Gulf of Mexico is the finest live rock in the world. We just happen to be blessed by living here on this coast and having it right here on our front doorstep. Look at those colors. That's an angel wing bivalve clam there that's covered in a coralline encrusting algae. Today we'll harvest 10 bags of rock, which is approximately 1,000 pounds of rock for the day. Now our quota is 25 buckets per day is what we're allowed to bring in. Here you see Mary cleaning off the unwanted sponges and other critters that will not survive in your tanks, so we pre-clean the rock on the boat. Here Captain Mark's got a really nice piece of Gorgonian rock encrusted with Christmas tree worms. We find quite a few like this, decorator pieces. He'll clean that and put it in a bucket and immerse the Gorgonian in water for the trip home. This trip, being a productive trip, I think we harvested 19 buckets this day, and we are allowed 25. So you can see it's not that easy with 2 divers and all the equipment involved. Live rocking is a pretty tough business. They're cleaning up the vessel. We're getting ready for the ride back home. Here you see how we carry the rock home in 5-gallon pails, and some of them are immersed in water with the more sensitive creatures. Okay, we're getting close to home again, coming back down the Anclote River towards Duke's Marina after a successful day diving. We'll be loading up the boat and heading towards our warehouse in Tampa, Florida, where we're going to show you a little bit more about how live rock's kept. Collecting live rock makes for a very long work day because we were all up at 6 a.m. this morning to begin this live rock adventure. By the time you get offshore and back to the shore and unload your live rock here and get back to the warehouse, it's usually 6 to 7 p.m. in the evening. So it's a 12-hour day for 19 buckets of live rock. Here we're going to load them up in the truck and we're going to head back to Tampa to our warehouse facility and show you a state-of-the-art holding facility for live rock. This is our warehouse at 3111 West Hillsboro in Tampa, Florida. We're just 2 miles from the air freight facility at the airport where we ship all our rock from, so it's a very convenient location. We have a little storefront here with 10,000 gallons of water, so come on in and check it out. This is the interior view of the shop. We have 2 main systems. The system on your right is a 4,000 gallon rock holding system. This system on the left is an invertebrate system, about 5,000 gallons holding capacity. We use these cartridge pool filters, 400 cubic square foot filtration, and these plastic holding vats are 275 gallons and the blue ones are 600 gallons. That blue vat will hold about 3,000 pounds of live rock very successfully. To hold live rock, you got to run a lot of water through it. As you see here, we're running 150 gallons per minute through this system. The rock must be introduced from the bottom. It must percolate up through the rock to successfully hold live rock. As you know, live rock comes from the wild and it's used to a lot of current and clear water and water movement. If you simulate this in your holding facility, you have much better success in holding large quantities of live rock like this. You're looking at here live rock that we've previously harvested. These are some other critters that we collect here in Tampa, moray eels. There's many different species of hermits. These are the famous blue-legged hermit crabs. There's about 6,000 herbivore hermits in that tank right there. And we also collect their cousins next door, a little larger variety that are indigenous to the Gulf area here. There's about 4 or 5 different species of hermit crabs. But we collect everything that's available in the Gulf for the reef systems. This is Gulf Live sand. It's a really nice quality sand. You can see the grain size here and the particles in it. And there's no dust in this sand. When you agitate the sand, the water stays very clear. We also collect seahorses. This is the giant variety. There's orange seahorses and red seahorses out here. We have a great diversity of sea life here off the coast of Tampa. You might not suspect so being this far north of the Keys, but We have a lot of critters in our Gulf out here. These are tree sponges, orange and red, that occur, and gorgonians. We have about 5 different species of gorgonians that we harvest. These are your coralline encrusted astrea snails, which occur out on the ledges where we harvest the rock from. They're a deep water astrea snail. They do a wonderful job in cleaning up your hair algae. And these are individual showpieces of rock with gorgonians and sponges on them, and they're harvested and taken care of extremely well on the boat, so they will survive in your aquarium. And we hatch our own brine to feed our reef tank with in the shop. This is also wild collected live rock, but I got a little quiz coming up for you here right now. I'm going to show you 6 different tanks of live rock, and I want you to tell me which tank contains the aquacultured live rock. Okay, so there's going to be 6 tanks, so look real close here and you figure out which one is aquacultured rock. This is tank number 1. Nice piece of rock there. And tank 2. A lot of plant growth here on this rock. A lot of serpulid worms, fan worms. Tank number 3. Is this the aquacultured rock? Look close now. I want you to pick the right tank. Tank number 4. Some pretty sponge growing on that rock. Tank number 5. That might be aquacultured rock. And tank number 6. So, which tank did you pick? If you said all 6, you're correct. This is that same piece of rock you're looking at right here. I harvested this month. This rock went in the water November of '93. You can see the many different encrusting algae and corallines and sponges and plant life on this rock. Remember, this rock's only 1.5 years old. It's pretty amazing aquaculture rock. Now I want to show you one of our other experiments here in the shop. This is our experimental tank, which Terry put together about 1 year ago. The only thing in this tank is live sand, live rock, a pump to move the water, and a protein skimmer. This tank has over 300 animals in it. You'll see the tridacna clams there. There's about 8 or 10 corals. The secret to this tank, I believe, is the live sand on a bare glass bottom, the movement of the water, and the many sand stirrers. Look at those corals. They're absolutely thriving in this tank. We have probably 300 blue-legged hermit crabs in here, and probably that many serpent stars and bristle stars, and turbo snails, astrea snails, pistol shrimps everywhere. And all these guys turn the sand continuously. We never get any dead spots in our sand, and the tank has been thriving for over 1 year. It's amazing how well this system works. So we wanted to show you this tank here today, and so y'all can compare it to what you're going to see at the conference. There you got some nice little star polyps. This tank is absolutely gorgeous, and there's no maintenance whatsoever. All Terry does is add fresh water. This tank temperature stays at 68 degrees with no chiller in the shop, and the tank is absolutely doing wonderful. I'm going to feed a little bit of shrimp here to the tank coming up, and I want you to watch how quick responding the serpent and brittle stars are to being fed. There you can see some of those little blue-legged hermit guys on there. They're the ones responsible, I think, for making this tank do so well. This is the right-hand side of the tank where we feed. Now you notice the shrimp going down. As soon as it hits the bottom, if you look right above it, you'll see some tentacles start to come out of the reef. There they are. And these are the serpent stars and the brittle stars, and the peppermint shrimp will all converge here on this area and feed. This, I think, is the key to this particular tank system. It's amazing how little it takes to have such a beautiful tank.
Okay, now that you've seen the history of live rock and some of the present of live rock, it's time to move on to the future of live rock, which actually began just about 5 miles east of here at Port Tampa, where we're going to look at one big pile of rocks. So come along to the future of live rock.
What you're looking at here is the 150-foot barge, which we contracted for and brought in to load the seed rock material on, also known as oololite or calcium carbonate coral rock, onto the barge. Here we're setting up, getting ready to conveyor the rock out onto the barge and put the 3 million pounds on board. This is the loader we used, one of the first of the 350 trips it took to load the rock onto the barge. It was a very time-consuming process. 350 trips just like that, 5 tons per trip, would be dumped into the hopper, come down the conveyor belt, and eventually be deposited onto the barge, which took approximately about 4 hours to load the first 500 tons. And then it took approximately 6 hours to load the rest of the material. So it was quite a consuming process. There you see the rock going onto the barge. It's really loud, as you can hear. And the pile is first beginning to grow here, as you'll see coming up. This rock's imported from the Bahamas, of calcium carbonate origin. It makes a very nice seed material to use for the cultivation of live rock. And there's the pile as it's beginning to grow. This is towards the evening here, and we're just beginning to fill the barge. It was the tip of the iceberg. Coming up here, you're going to see one corner of the lease site area in the Gulf of Mexico. That's a stainless steel rod driven into the bottom with lines and buoys floating off of it to mark the 4 corners. As we progress in the video, you'll see that the bottom is about 99% sand bottom. There's no hard bottom. What you see floating around is just some mobile algae floating there. The sand is approximately 2 to 4 inches thick, which allows the rock to settle a bit but not to bury too much. This particular area here you're looking at is the deposition area where the rock will be dropped, and it's close to some hard bottom habitat areas which must be present to allow the creatures and organisms to gravitate over to your culture rock from the natural existing hard bottom. You must stay 50 feet away from any naturally occurring bottom with the seed material rock. There on the right you see one little piece of rock there that's natural occurring that we would use for our seed material to come over from that particular rock. And here the sand is approximately 2 to 4 inches deep in this particular area. You see there's no seagrasses, no corals, nothing is allowed on the site except for sand, so we do not destroy any of the natural environment. This is very important for us and for the state of Florida to do this correctly. Here you're looking at the barge on site. We're out in the Gulf of Mexico on the 26th. This is one of my support vessels. We're out here helping the barge in the right position and making sure that when we drop those spuds that we're directly on site in the correct deposition area. You see that little white buoy right there in front of the boat? That's one corner of the area of the lease. Here we're pushing the barge up and getting ready to drop those spuds and hooking the bucket up. And you can see there was one white buoy there in front of the barge. It's the area. So see, we're inching right up to the very center of the lease area. This rock you're looking at is over 3 million pounds there. What he did was drop the bucket down to the bottom there to test the bottom to see how deep it is so they can measure the deposition so it won't be more than 2 foot deep on the bottom as accorded to in the state of Florida's lease. This rock is a geologically coral rock. It's eons old. It was produced in the islands. Unfortunately, there's no more available for this activity from that source, and it's a perfect substrate being coral rock, similar to what's existing in the Gulf of Mexico now. This will be the first drop of rock. You'll notice there's some sand mixed there. That's natural. It's just on the top of the pile. As you get down into the pile, it's all rock. And he distributed, you see how he distributed the rock and fanned it out over the bottom is how the whole area was laid down. This is the first 500 tons going in here on this site. And later in the day here we'll be showing you the deposition of the rest of the 1,000 tons on the other side of the barge. This is a very costly operation, as you can see. You've got 2 barges there, a crane operator. You have to have a tugboat, 2 captains for 4 days. It's not a very inexpensive project. Here the rock is being dumped in. You see the pile's about halfway done. And the day is calming out. It turned into a pretty nice day. There we are in front of our pile of rock. That's approximately 1,000 tons of rock you're looking at there. And I suggest you don't try this barefooted. It's pretty tough on the feet.
That's a good pose. I like that, Rich.
And the pile actually was about 20 foot tall. I don't suggest doing this unless you're a professional live rocker or you have bulletproof shorts on, one or the other.
There's the future.
This particular pile of rock took approximately 6 hours to unload on the bottom in my particular lease area. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get all the rock off because the bucket could not grab what was left on the bottom of the pile. So I proceeded to throw those rocks off one at a time, but that didn't last long with a 41-year-old back condition. This is where the bulletproof vest comes in handy. Here you're looking at the rock, 3 hours old. This rock's only been in the water 3 hours, and there's already fish investigating. There's a squirrelfish right there swimming around on that rock. Hasn't been in the water 3 hours, and he's checking out his new environment and picking around and seeing what's there. It was amazing. The sediment, there was no sediment. It disappeared. The fish were on site immediately. As soon as we were down there filming, the fish were everywhere. And it looked very natural. The bottom, all that rock, if it had been brown, you wouldn't be able to tell it wasn't there for eons. It looked very natural on the bottom, and it was a real attribute to the environment here. I'm sure it's, there's a little hole there. You see that hole? I'm sure some fish is going to be living in there. You're going to see that coming up on the next sequence here. You'll see on this rock here, all the holes, it's very porous. It is calcium carbonate coral rock. It's the perfect host for an aquaculture project, as the organisms can bury and burrow into this type of rock. And it's physically appealing for aquariums because of the shapes of the rocks, the holes, and the dimensions are of the proper size for aquaria today. And what you're looking at here is definitely the future of our industry. This is aquacultured live rock. You see the fish swimming around on it. You see the rock buried down into the sand. About 30% of the first 500 tons that I placed did become buried in the sand, even though it was only 4 to 6 inch sand. That's why you must put out massive quantities of rock if you're going to do this commercially. You see the fish investigating, hanging out. These are French grunts, gray grunts. There's a black grouper right there swam by the picture. They see a little black sea bass there. He lives right there in that little hole. They've already taken to this reef since November. It's a living, teeming reef. It is definitely the future of the industry. If you pick up one of those rocks, there'll be 5 baby sea urchins underneath it, and everything on this reef is baby. It's a juvenile reef. And you see there the sand encroaching onto the area. Sand is a problem. Like I said, 30% is now buried. Hopefully that will change with the seasons and the storms, and we'll constantly uncover and then rebury the rock. See the sea urchins there, all the algae is growing. There's corallite algae, there's small corals already attached and growing, and there you see the sand that's come in and encroached upon my rock there and buried it. There's another black sea bass going into his little hole there. It's a living, teeming, brand new reef. It's a juvenile producing reef, and I definitely think it's the future for this industry of live rock. There you see a rock that was buried. The bottom lower portion was in the sand. I dug it up and pulled it out. You can see it's white, and above it you can see the growth that's taken place since November of '93. It's impressive, but it won't be a quality to replace our product for approximately 3 to 4 years that we now harvest in the wild, but this is a start. There you see some more algae on the rock, the fish. The rock is becoming pretty well colonized. It's approaching a live base rock product, but it's our future, and I thank you for attending.